Good morning. Good morning. I'm honored to be joined by many of my former colleagues in the state legislature and our legislative leaders, Senator Ort and Assemblyman Barkley, who are doing a phenomenal job here representing the interests of all New Yorkers. In her State of the State address just 1 year ago, Governor Hochul promised New Yorkers that she would pursue the common good with common sense by seeking common ground. She failed. What's common sense about doubling down on sanctuary state policies that have made New York a magnet for illegal immigrants, spending billions of dollars of your tax money to provide free housing, health care, food, clothing, and education to illegal immigrants? It's nuts. We're signing a state budget that is more than twice the size of Florida's, despite having a smaller population. We're sticking with cashless bail, the single stupidest piece of legislation that has ever been signed into law anywhere in the country. Or raise the age in which 16 and 17-year-olds using guns in the commission of a crime are treated in family court rather than criminal court. Or clean slate laws that wipe away a criminal's record. Meanwhile, felony assaults in New York City are up nearly 150%, and people are being burned alive on a subway car. What's common sense about pushing policies that gave us the highest state and local taxes in America, resulting in the worst outmigration of any state in the country? On top of that, state spending is up $90 billion since Kathy Hochul took statewide office, with no end in sight. We're jamming a congestion pricing scheme down the throats of working families and businesses to bail out the corrupt and broken MTA. Think about this. She is literally charging hardworking New Yorkers $2,500 annually just for the privilege to drive to work, but has no problem shelling out debit cards or unemployment benefits for illegal immigrants with your tax money. What is common sense about pushing an absurd proposal to mandate high-density development in the suburbs that would supersede local zoning and destroy communities? Or claiming to care about working people while New York hemorrhages manufacturing jobs faster than any state in America except one? You know the answer as well as I do. Not a damn thing. On top of that, how do you seek common ground by accusing anyone who doesn't agree with you politically of being racist, misogynist, or worse? Or when you tell every Republican in the state they are, quote unquote, not New Yorkers, and to just jump on a bus and head down to Florida because you don't agree with them? In short, you don't. And Kathy Hochul never has. She is a feckless and failed governor who needs to be replaced in 2026. In Washington, I was proud to be rated the fourth most bipartisan member of Congress, thanks to a record of truly finding common ground between Democrats and Republicans to solve problems like raising the SALT deduction, which we will get done in this Congress. We're fixing our broken immigration system and securing the border, combating anti-Semitism, stopping congestion pricing, cracking down on crime, and standing with our police. In that sense, I subscribe to former Mayor Koch's axiom about politics, which was, if you agree with me on 9 out of 12 issues, vote for me. If you agree with me on 12 out of 12 issues, go have your head examined. We're not going to agree on everything. And that's a good thing. That's why we have a constitutional republic. It's why we have a democracy. Now, that approach and proven record of working across the aisle helped me become one of only 3 Republican members of Congress to win re-election in a district also won by Vice President Harris this November. Unfortunately, The speech Governor Hochul is planning to deliver today isn't about working across the aisle to make New York a better, more affordable, safer place to live, work, raise a family, or retire. I can't remember the last time she sat down with any one of my legislative colleagues here to really delve into the problems facing New York. Nope. Rather, it's about cynically trying to rehab her abysmal public image by spending your own tax dollars to try and buy you off. Let me be more clear. Taking thousands of dollars out of New Yorkers' left pocket and then putting $500 in their right pocket is not a tax cut. It's an insult. And it's precisely why millions of New Yorkers have headed for the exits. Let's be honest, the governor's rebate check proposal doesn't make her a tax cutter any more than her endlessly reminding people she's a Bills fan makes people think she cares about working families upstate. Just ask about the 1,500 people laid off at the Sumitomo rubber factory in Tonawanda just before Christmas, or the 230 people who are losing their jobs this summer when Rite Aid shuts down their distribution center in Liverpool. If she really wanted to provide tax relief to the most overtaxed people in America, Governor Hochul would amend the state constitution to require a supermajority vote to raise state taxes in the future. If she really cared about making things more affordable, Governor Hochul would repeal the electric vehicle mandates banning the sale of gas-powered cars by 2035, just like the Democratic governor of Connecticut announced he was going to do. And she would end the moratorium on extracting natural gas. There is nobody in this state whose utility bills have gone down under Governor Hochul. In fact, they have skyrocketed because of the disastrous energy policies put forth by Democratic supermajorities and Governor Hochul. Even Tom DiNapoli has said the CLCPA is a failure. Not only will such a mandate on EVs hit lower income New Yorkers the hardest, but the fact is we as a state don't and won't have anywhere near the necessary number of charging stations to make mass EV use practical. But no, she won't do any of that. Instead, Governor Hochul will stand in the egg today and promise a litany of big government giveaways that sound great on paper, some of which may even be good ideas like investments in childcare and healthcare, infrastructure, and more affordable home ownership. But the reality is that she can't and won't deliver on these pie-in-the-sky promises. I know it, you know it, they know it, and worst of all, she knows it. And the way to deliver change is through bold and courageous reform that roots out corruption and waste, dramatically reduces the size and cost of government, restores law and order, and provides equal opportunity for every person who works hard and plays by the rules to achieve their American dream right here in New York. We live in the greatest state in the country. The only thing standing in our way is failed, incompetent leadership at the very top. So with resolve, with toughness, and willingness to bring people together to solve problems, while breaking apart the corrupt special interest cabals that run our state today, we can change things for the better for each and every New Yorker. And with that, I'm proud to introduce my colleague and friend, the Senate Republican leader, Rob Ortt.
Well, it's good to be here today with all of you. It's good to be here with my colleagues in both the Assembly and my members in the Senate Republican Conference. And of course, it's great to welcome my friend, my former colleague here in the state legislature, Congressman Lawler, here to the state capitol. Yesterday, I stood here with my colleagues in the Senate Republican Conference, and we had our agenda rollout, and we talked about a number of the issues that Congressman Lawler just hit on. We're obviously about in a couple hours to hear another state of the state. I sat through a lot of them, both through former Governor Cuomo and now several through Governor Hochul. And to Congressman Lawler's point, there's going to be a lot of platitudes, a lot of lip service to different things. No doubt, as I said yesterday, you will hear a lot about we'll hear the word affordability a lot. And we have over the last several, I guess, years, since the Biden inflation took off and people had less money in their pockets, we heard about affordability. But I want to be very clear in a policy sense. You cannot make things more affordable by taxing people more and spending more money. I said it yesterday, I'll say it again, I will say it till I'm blue in the face. If we could spend our way to an affordable state, we would already be the most affordable state in the country. We would be. We spend $243 billion. Again, to put that in perspective, that is larger than Texas and Florida's budgets combined. That is 1.5 times more per resident what California spends in their budget. So even a very blue, left-leaning state spends, I guess I could say they're better stewards of tax dollars than the state of New York is. So the question I always say is, why is New York so much more expensive to run? Do we give more? Do New Yorkers get more from their government than Californians? Do they get more from their government than Florida or Texas? If you think the answer is yes, then why do so many New Yorkers live in Florida and Texas and Tennessee and North Carolina? Because those states offer, I don't know about services, but I tell you what, they offer more opportunity. They offer more freedom. They offer you to keep more of your money and to have more of a say in your destiny and your hopes and dreams in those states. The Lieutenant Governor, I said this yesterday, the Lieutenant Governor during the opening day ceremonies in the Senate talked about hopes and dreams in New York. And I said, hopes and dreams there's a price tag with hopes and dreams. And we've made pursuing your hopes and dreams in New York very expensive. And that is why people are pursuing them in other states. So I don't believe that the governor either knows or is serious about pursuing real policies to make New York more affordable for everybody, but specifically for working people, for middle class people. That's who's leaving, by and large. However you want to define that bracket, that's who's leaving. They'll always say, well, we think, we're here to make sure the wealthy, we're not concerned about the wealthy, they should pay their fair share. Let me be honest and be very blunt. The wealthy are not the ones who are leaving in droves. If you're wealthy and you live in Manhattan, you're staying here because all these things don't affect you the same way. You can deal with congestion pricing. You can deal with a few more taxes, and you're going to still stay here. The people that are leaving are the middle income people because it hits their bottom line far differently. They're the ones who are putting their houses up for sale and moving to Florida, moving to Texas. The employers, like Sumitomo, don't kid yourself that they just left because of some global, economic issue. They left because New York policies, because they decided that we are not going to make the investment into the facility. We're not going to make the investment into our company, into this facility, the North American Distribution Center. So unless they're going to decide no longer to sell tires to North America, which I don't believe is the case, I would not be stunned if there's a Sumitomo facility that opens up in some other state in the future. They weren't going to make that investment here in New York, and I've seen that in my district, in Western New York, in upstate New York, and even across the state, time and again, the companies say, you know what, we're not making any long-term investment in New York because it's not economically beneficial to us. So what does that mean? That means that employees, it's no longer economic beneficially to them when they lose their job. And it's policies matter, elections matter. The governor needs to stand up to the far left in the legislature. She has shown an unwillingness or an inability to do so. So she can say the word affordability 1,000,000 times or 243 billion times. She can sit there and talk about $300 rebate checks. No one is going to turn those away. No New Yorker, it's their money, they'll take it. But does anyone really believe that that is going to make a difference in New Yorkers' lives. Does anyone believe that New Yorkers don't see right through that? That is a political gimmick that's been tried out for years. It's not new. I'm not even saying she came up with it. But no one is fooled. The affordability crisis we have is not going to be solved with a $300 rebate check and a handshake. There needs to be tax cuts. There needs to be a constitutional amendment, as the congressman said, to raise taxes, a supermajority to raise taxes of voters. We cannot spend our way out of this issue, and we got to get real. And as he mentioned, we're doing a lot of other things. The Farm Fair Labor Act increased the cost on our farmers, which increases their ability, increases the cost for them to get food to market. You know what that means? That means in many cases, New York is buying produce, not from New York farms, but from farms in other states and in other countries. Our energy policy for many years under Democrat governors has been export jobs, import energy. That is our policy. That is the policy. Export jobs, import energy. We're fine bringing in dirty power from other states. Why? Because it doesn't count against our numbers. But we're also fine sending the jobs that make that energy to those other states, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, everywhere else, New Jersey. So these are the kinds of things, as the congressman mentioned, the congestion pricing scheme. To, on one hand, give a $300 check, and on another hand, say, oh, you got to pay more money to come. They're still losing, and New Yorkers know it. And the worst part is they're paying more and they're getting less. Look at the situation in the New York City subways. It's a disgrace. That should be the best public transit system in the world. And don't tell me it's not because they don't have enough money. Do not ever tell me or anyone else, I don't ever want to hear that we have to raise taxes for the MTA ever again in my lifetime. Because I just heard the congestion pricing scheme was to help fund the MTA. Now I'm told we got to raise taxes to help fund the MTA. We could give the state budget $243 billion to the MTA, and I promise you, next year they would need more, and they wouldn't even be able to tell me where the $243 billion went. It's the most mismanaged, poorly run public transportation system of any major city, I think, in the country, maybe in the world. And it's so violent. So you're going to tell people, we need you to ride the subways. That's your alternative to congestion pricing. And people watch every day as someone's thrown in front of a train, someone's burned alive, someone's assaulted. Every day I see a video that reminds me that Daniel Penny was a hero and not the one who should have been charged with a crime. Every single day. And obviously the immigration, the sanctuary policies, no doubt this will be a topic in the mayoral race coming up. Is the governor going to really talk about doing anything on the illegal immigrant issue here in the state of New York, the hundreds of thousands of people that have come here? Is she going to ask for more money in her State of the Budget? I know today's State of the State, her budget address is coming up on the 21st. Is she going to ask? We've spent $4.3 billion officially in the state budget the last 2 years. Are we going to need more money for that? And what is the number? How much is enough? As New Yorkers struggle for health care, for housing, we're providing this to people who are not in this country legally, who are seeking asylum, most of whom will never be granted asylum, but because of sanctuary policies, they will be de facto New York residents for the rest of their lives. We continue to put forward policies that prevent our local law enforcement from working with federal law enforcement to identify people like Jose Ibarra, people like the individual who lit the lady on fire on the subway train. Is the governor going to address that? And I'll just end by saying, I said this yesterday, the governor has talked about this, but she's never put forward, again, policies to address the outmigration of New Yorkers. That is the single biggest threat to the future of New York State. We're losing taxpayers, our tax base. So even if the most liberal person, you're losing the people who would fund the programs that you so passionately feel we need or we need to do more. Somehow they have to be paid for. The people who are going to pay for them are leaving. And we're also losing our future workforce, the people that we would expect to be part of future companies. That's why companies aren't going to invest here, because they're going to say, you know what, the workforce, the talent pool that I need to draw from is not in New York. It's in other states. And if you can't see that, you don't need to be in the governor's office. Because you don't need an MBA from the Wharton School to be able to make this connection and see that policies we pass here in New York have a direct impact on people's lives, on people, the opportunities they have, on the ability to pursue their hopes and dreams in New York State. As the congressman said, this is still, in spite of that, I travel all around New York. I know he does, I know Will Barkley does. This is a great state. And the people who've hung in here are tough people, because you'd have to be. You'd have to be. To stay here, to watch the Jets and Giants, you know, you'd have to be really tough to stay here over those years. But thankfully we have the Bills. But you, to stay here, there are millions of New Yorkers who are sitting here saying, I'm not leaving. This is my home state. I should not have to go to Florida. I should not have to go to Texas. I should not have to go to Tennessee. I should be able to have a state that allows me to pursue my hopes and dreams, the American dream, here in New York. And we need a governor and a lot more elected officials in this place who understand that, who are going to pass policies to support that. And I thank the congressman for being here today. He's a friend, he's a New Yorker, and even though, as he's in Washington fighting for his district, he gets it and he fights every day, and he represents, lest anyone think that he represents some red district. He represents a district that I think in some ways is very emblematic of the state of New York. And he's won it 2 times because his policies, that means Democrats, that means blanks, have cast a vote for him. He mentioned the Connecticut governor, a Democrat. So a lot of these things aren't even partisan issues any longer, as much as some of my colleagues would like to frame them that way. These are the common sense issues. These are the issues that common sense New Yorkers believe should be pursued. And if my colleagues across the aisle don't feel the same way, then there's going to be a lot more Republicans in office in the future here in New York State, and that's a great thing. So, I want to call up my good friend, the former leader of Congressman Lawler when he was in the Assembly, my colleague in the Assembly, a fighter for these issues for a very long time, a great leader of his conference, and that is my buddy, Assembly Leader Will Barkley.
I'm tempted to say ditto and just clear the stage, but no, thank you, Leader Ort. It's great to be here with everybody. Happy New Year's to you and your conference. I know our conference looks forward to the great partnership we've had. And we always say when we're in one single voice, and you hear my talking points, you'll realize we really are on the same page. We're able to get our message out more effectively here in Albany. I want to thank the Congressman for organizing this event. As mentioned, he's a former colleague, he's a friend. He's done a tremendous job in Congress. As Leader Ort mentioned, he doesn't come from an easy district. It's no safe seat where Congressman Lawler is, but because he talks common sense issues, because he meets the voters, goes out and understands the voters' needs, he was reelected. And possibly, just possibly, there may be another office in the future for Mike Lawler. I also want to recognize the chairman of our state party who does a great job, Ed Cox. So we just came off an election. And not surprising, in that election, the reason we have President Trump, because people are fed up. They're fed up with the cost of living, they're fed up with crime, and they're fed up with the migrant crisis. Now, anyone's elected office knows polls. They know, what you have to say to get reelected. And we've heard it from this governor. She's saying the right things. She's talking about affordability. But as the congressman said, what Leader Ort said, you can't talk about it and just have rhetoric and not have the policy to back it up. You can't say you're for affordability and then charge New Yorkers $9 to drive in New York City. You can't say you're for affordability and then pass environmental policies that are going to raise utility bills on all New Yorkers. You can't say you're for affordability and then take money from everybody and then give it back to a few people and call it an inflation refund. We need true policies that are going to help put money back in the pockets of New Yorkers and make the cost of living in New York more reasonable. So far, I haven't heard it from the governor. I haven't heard those policies being stated by either of the majorities. Crime. Crime was a big issue in this election, rightfully so. The governor says she's out there fighting crime. You can't say you're fighting crime when you do nothing about bail reform, when you do nothing about raise the age. In fact, you've passed policies and advocate for policies, take parole. You're making the situation worse. And you can't say the subways are safe. You can't say the subways are safe and then have the same day have a tragic time when the person was burned on the subway. In my mind, that's not fighting crime. As Leader Ward talked about too, the migrant crisis. New Yorkers are concerned about the migrant crisis. We're concerned about it here on the state, spending $5, $6, $7, $8, $12 billion on the migrant crisis. You can't say you're trying to solve the migrant crisis when you're doing absolutely nothing about the sanctuary policies that we have in New York, doing absolutely nothing about the green light bill that we passed here in New York. So I know our conference, I know the Senate Republicans, I know Congressman Lawler, because we have a record of doing it. We're willing to work in a bipartisan manner. This isn't political. These are common sense. We have common sense solutions to these issues that New Yorkers are most concerned about. So I'm curious what the governor is going to say. We know some of the things she's talked about in her State of the State. We're curious what she's going to say. But ultimately, hold her feet to the fire. That's what we're going to do. You can't just talk about it. You can't just, you got to actually walk the walk. You got to pass the policies that are going to help all New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader Barkley. Thank you, Leader Ort. I'm going to ask Chairman Ed Cox to say a few words. Chairman.
It's a pleasure to be here today at this rally that's organized by Congressman Lawler. I wanted to elucidate a little bit more what Leader Ort said about New York is in the business, unfortunately, under this Democratic governor and her predecessors, of exporting jobs and importing energy. Comes to mind, Deputy Leader Generis. He killed 27,000 good Amazon jobs in his district just to please the power in his district, Madam AOC. Governor Cuomo, he has, and we're the only state that has these natural resources, he has banned natural gas development in New York State and the pipelines that would carry good, cheap New York natural gas all around the state and to New England. These are killing jobs. Tens of thousands in Queens, hundreds of thousands in the natural gas industry. Just take a look at Pennsylvania on the other side of the border. And now I understand that in her State of the State, Governor Hochul is going to propose something called cap and invest. Normally it's called cap and trade, but I guess they don't like the word trade. So it's cap and invest. And that's going to smother jobs in businesses all throughout the state. And it is well known that if that policy had any value at all, it ought to be done on a national level, not in one state, just to prove an ideological point. So that's what we're talking about with the leadership of the other party. I'd like to say a few things about Mike Lawler. I think I've known him longer than just about anyone else here. He was a rising senior when he volunteered to join me as chairman of the McCain campaign in 2008 here in New York State. And right from the get-go, I knew he was a talented individual who really cared about New York State and wanted to do something to improve the situation in New York State. And he joined right after he graduated, he joined the state party, quickly rose to be my executive director, there's no better, I've never had a better executive director than Mike Lawler. He's extraordinary talent, extraordinary talent. But then to accomplish his goals of really going on to do something for all the problems that he saw as executive director of the party, he decided he would get into helping others run for office. And then he decided, even though it was tough in that assembly district, he decided he'd run for the assembly. And he won that. He won it. And then after we accomplished the good, honest redistricting of congressional districts, he was sitting in his assembly seat and saying, oh, look at that. The special master has drawn a district. I can win that one. But it was a tough district. It's a Democratic district. And let me tell you, he organized it, he worked at it, and he defeated Sean Patrick Maloney, who was heading the DCCC. That was a huge victory that resonated all around the country. So, Mike, I appreciate you getting us together. I appreciate very much what the leaders have said. The Republican Party's on the move here in New York, and we are going to have a Republican governor after 2026. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Cox. And with that, any questions, comments, or insults anybody has? Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, as the beginning of congestion pricing, transit riders, commuters have been saying that they enjoy the traffic-free streets. Buses are moving faster, and even drives into Manhattan are faster, it goes really well, lots of traffic. So why do you want to be the basic person who takes that away and puts traffic back on the streets?
Love the framing there. Look, I love that the MTA put out a report showing 1 week in January and compared that to the average commute for the entire year of 2024. This whole thing is a scam. It is a money grab. It has nothing to do with congestion. It has nothing to do with commute time. It has nothing to do with the environment or safety. The governor needs to raise $1 billion in revenue so they can borrow $15 billion more for the capital program. Do you know the MTA has more debt than 80% of the states in the country? 80% of the states. That is the most incompetent, bloated, mismanaged authority in the country, bar none. It's not even close. So the fact is that if they really wanted to reduce congestion, they would do a few things. Number one, actually make sure the subway is safe to ride. Number two, they would stop clogging up every single road in the city, putting restaurants, bikes, taking up so much of the traffic lanes, and actually reducing traffic to single lane. Number three, they would actually sync the lights so you can move more than one block at a time. So there's a lot that can be done to reduce congestion, but the fact is this was never about that. This is about money. And the MTA loses $700 million a year from people who refuse to pay to ride the subway and jump the turnstile. Meanwhile, this place is talking about giving people free rides on buses, on trains, and taxing commuters who, by the way, don't have a one-seat ride. I live in Rockland County. Rockland County does not have a one-seat ride. The MTA has reduced express rail service. We pay $50 million more in taxes a year than services we receive. So yes, there are cops, there are firefighters, there are EMS workers, there are nurses, doctors, teachers who have to commute into the city and drive. They should not be penalized to do that. And if the MTA needs money, they should look no further than the $4 billion they're pissing away on illegal immigrants with free housing, healthcare, clothing, food, and education in the state budget. Or the $100 million used on welfare for politicians in New York's scam of a taxpayer finance system for political campaigns. Get rid of that. Put that towards the MTA. So there's a lot that can actually be done to address the issue of the MTA's finances, to pay for the capital program, and to address the issue of congestion. But I don't buy this nonsense that was put out showing a 1-week comparison to an average commute time for an entire year. That's laughable.
Governor Hochul has said that you should accept like a full repeal of the SALT tax cap of $10,000. No other cap should be in place. I'm wondering what your response is to that, and as a follow-up to that, I'm wondering when you plan to master.
So, with respect to the governor, is it her position that if she doesn't get unlimited, she would like it to stay at $10,000? I mean, what an asinine statement she has made. First of all, if the tax bill expires, yes, SALT would go back unlimited. But here's the problem. It would be associated with the single largest tax increase in American history. Rates would go up, and the alternative minimum tax would come back, which would cripple New York. So we have to negotiate in good faith on this issue. I have proposed legislation that would increase the SALT cap to $100,000 for individual, $200,000 for married couples. That would more than cover most everybody in this state. In fact, the only people who it wouldn't cover are the uber wealthy that Kathy Hochul is now proposing to raise a millionaire's tax on. So she doesn't give a crap about taxes. That much is clear. We've seen how much she just continues to throw one tax after the next at people. But the problem is not the cap on SALT. The problem is that Kathy Hochul has increased state spending by $90 billion since she took office as lieutenant governor, and over $61 billion since becoming governor. That is crippling this state. It is the reason we lead the nation in outmigration. People cannot afford to live here. So if Kathy Hochul wanted to do something to actually help New Yorkers, she wouldn't propose more spending in today's state of the state. She would actually propose cutting spending, and she would propose cutting taxes. But that's not what she's going to do, because she is the most inept, incompetent, feckless governor in America, and she knows it. So, with respect to my intentions, obviously I'm looking at it. That's not a secret. I won't make a decision for some time. But the reality of this is very simple. This cannot continue. We cannot continue down this path where New York leads the nation in outmigration, where businesses are shutting down and leaving, where New York leads the nation, the highest tax burden, the worst business climate. New Yorkers are suffering. And the level of gross incompetence by the leadership in the governor's office, by the Senate majority leader, by the Speaker of the Assembly, and what they have allowed to happen to this state is shameful. So, we will look at it for sure. And ultimately make a decision sometime this year. But I can tell you this, I will do everything in my power to make sure she is not governor in 2026. Well, look, we're in the 2026 election cycle, so I mean the reality is you haven't seen Kathy Hochul do more than she has in the last few weeks because she's scared. I mean, these photo ops are comical. Taking a selfie on a subway right after a woman is burned alive. This is somebody who said she paused congestion pricing because she went to a diner and somebody informed her that congestion pricing is a problem, so I'm going to pause it, because I want to address the issue of affordability. But immediately after the election, magically, it's no longer an issue, and we're going to jam it through. Her political malfeasance is on full display for everybody every day. But the fact is, obviously, 2026 is just around the corner, and we'll see how it plays out.
When it comes to the president-elect, members of your party, I believe you have told me that when it comes to maybe his cabinet appointments, this is what voters want. They voted for this. In New York, it's a Democratic majority, as was majority in the past. You remain in minority. Seats were flipped. There was Congress, the Democratic side of things. I guess, do you think this messaging works when it comes to New Yorkers as you remain in the minority? I guess your comments.
Yes, look, we have made significant progress over the last few years. Every election is in and of itself unique. Candidates matter, the message matters, but I have been successful now 3 times in 2-to-1 Democratic districts. Why? Because I show up in every community, because I talk about issues in a common sense way that the average New Yorker can understand as they're trying to make ends meet, as they're going to work, as they're taking care of their families. The fact is, no New Yorker thinks that allowing violent criminals back on the streets to reoffend is good policy. No New Yorker thinks hosing and fleecing taxpayers out of $2,500 annually just for the privilege of commuting to work is good policy. No New Yorker thinks trying to shove down a community's throats and override local zoning and build multifamily housing in single-family neighborhoods is good policy. The fact is, Kathy Hochul has failed at everything she has done. She just happened to fail up because of the incompetence and corruption of Andrew Cuomo. But the fact is, she has never managed anything, and that much is clear based on how she has handled her job as governor. So no, New Yorkers are wise, they're smart. We have made significant progress. You have seen Republicans flip seats in Congress, in the state Senate, in the state Assembly. Rome wasn't built in a day, but certainly under Kathy Hochul, Rome is burning, and we need to save it. So, look, the affordability crisis is the biggest issue impacting New Yorkers. Businesses are leaving this state, and even ones that are coming are concerned about the cost of doing business. They're concerned about the burdensome regulations. Over a decade ago, the state Senate Republican Conference did a study on regulations in the state. There was over 1 million business regulations on the books. We need to not only cut taxes, we need to not only cut state spending, we need to cut the regulatory body across the state. It is stifling innovation, it is stifling business, it is stifling job creation. We need to increase domestic production of energy here in New York, which means you have to lift the moratorium on natural gas extraction. You can mandate electricity for everything, all electric hookups for new buildings, EV mandates. Guess what? 70% of electricity is generated by natural gas. How in God's name are you going to create enough electricity when you are jacking up the demand of electric? You can't. So the reality is you need a coherent energy policy. Yes, we need to build more housing. We're 6.5 million units underbuilt nationwide. I represent one of the highest property tax counties in America, Westchester and Rockland counties. Part of the challenge is there isn't enough housing supply. So we do need housing, but it needs to be done in concert with local municipalities, not a top-down mandate from Albany. And the fact is, you have a public safety crisis. People are leaving this state not just because of the affordability crisis, but because of the quality of life. They don't feel safe. That has had a dramatic impact on New York City. Wall Street is leaving. Banks, financial service industry, they're going to Florida, they're going to Texas, they're going to Georgia, they're going to North Carolina. Wall Street is the golden goose that has allowed New York to flourish. We need to reverse that trend. So there is a lot that can and should be done, but you actually need leadership that can effectuate that change. Governor Hochul has proven she cannot. With respect to upstate transit, that obviously is paramount. Whether you talk about infrastructure, whether you talk about rail, we need to increase our investments in infrastructure. The federal government has given New York $100 billion. Why is that money sitting in Albany's coffers? Why are we not moving forward on these projects? So it is critically important when you talk about roads, bridges, culverts, sewer, water, when you talk about transit, absolutely we have to invest in it. It is a priority to me because connecting Buffalo to New York City and beyond is critical. We need a economy that is interconnected across the state if we are not only to grow the economy in New York, not only to bring people back, bring manufacturing back, keep our population here, there needs to be integration. Yes?
How do you feel about involuntary commitment?
I'm sorry?
Involuntary commitment, how do you feel about that?
It's critical. This has been a failure of going back to Bill de Blasio. I mean, Mike Bloomberg was able to clean up the city in part because of the way they were dealing with those that were homeless or dealing with mental illness or drug addiction. And the failure of the city to address that, as well as the failure of the state to make sure that the laws reflect that, has created a crisis in New York City. The fact is, the number one priority of the state has to be to ensure the safety and well-being of every New Yorker. And that requires us to address this scourge of mental health that is causing chaos and destruction on the streets of New York City. So it should be fixed. It should be addressed, and the law should be changed.
Regarding congestion pricing, you said that you're being charged the privilege of going to work. Millions of commuters take transit, whether the subway or commuter rail, every day. Should we expect to see a Republican proposal to make public transit free in the near future? And regarding out-migration,
So let me ask you a simple question. Who's paying for the free public transit?
I'm asking you, you said that
Who's paying for it?
are paying for the privilege to go to work. People pay.
Right, we already pay tolls, we already pay gasoline, you pay parking. But Governor Hochul, while the MTA loses $700 million a year from people who refuse to pay to ride the subway system, they jump the turnstiles, refuse to pay. She now, on top of the MTA payroll tax, on top of the MTA mobility tax, on top of the fees that we pay as property taxpayers towards the MTA, on top of the tolls, on top of the gas, now wants to implement a congestion pricing tax. That's what I'm talking about. So, no, this idea that everything should be free, wouldn't it be lovely if we all lived in such a rosy world? That's not reality. And that's part of the reason New York is in the mess that it's in. So, no, I'm not proposing free transit for everybody.
And regarding out-migration, one of the reasons why we're seeing out-migration not just is, yes, by tax affordability, but also housing. You talked about opposition to the government plan to force high-density housing in suburbs. Do you have a plan to increase the housing supply and not to ensure that people can move to the suburbs? If
Well,
housing
again, it should not be mandated. It should be collaborative. New York State has home rule built into our Constitution. The governor tried to circumvent that, which is why not just Republicans, but even Democrats in the suburbs push back against it. I am on the Housing and Insurance Subcommittee. I unveiled last year a 208-page, 39-provision housing plan from the federal government on what we could do to help incentivize states and localities. We're happy to give that to you so you can review it. But the objective certainly is to build more housing across the country. As I said, we're 6.5 million units underbuilt. The average home value in Westchester County, for instance, has gone from $700,000 to $1.1 million in just 4 years. Why? Because there was a demand. New York City residents were trying to get out of New York City, but there's not enough supply. But I have areas that include the New York City watershed. You can't mandate housing in those areas and where the infrastructure is not available. So there's a lot that needs to be done, but Governor Hochul's harebrained policies are not the way to do it.
How much would the incentives cost?
What do you mean?
The state.
What in,
The state would have to pay incentives. That's the carrot, there is the money.
yeah.
What kind of price tag would that be?
What we're talking about is what is already existing within federal law and federal programs within HUD. We're gonna wrap it up just because I know the conferences have time. Happy to do a sidebar with anybody else after this.